How's everyone doing?
Good.
Fantastic. Yesterday, in 0.2 of a second, and 77.5 million results later, I had that many results for the word in the Google search, missing people. There are government organizations, Facebook pages, and YouTube channels dedicated to finding the lost. And though we may differ on the definitions from our government, I believe, too, the church is on a mission for those that are lost. In fact, I believe it's at the very center of our Christian message, and I believe to fully grasp the concept of this, we need to look at the beginning in the early church movement. See, juxtaposed to the church of today, the early church has shining differences, and one that I find to be so interesting is the idea and the symbol of grace, atonement, and love that's found. See, in our world today, we see the cross as that idea of atonement. We see it on jewelry, t-shirts, and tattooed everywhere that I can see. But this was not true for the early church. In fact, professor and author Kenneth Bailey wrote in his book, Finding the Lost Cultural Keys to Luke chapter 15, that the cross itself was far too horrifying of a symbol to use in worship for the early Christians. He compared it to Christians of today if Christ were crucified in this time, us using the electric chair as a symbol of atonement. See, it's too gruesome and too far connected with raw brutality for us to use it as a symbol, so the early church often used alternative symbols. And the one that had wide use was that of the shepherd with the sheep on its back. And we see this in museums all over the place, from Jerusalem to Egypt. And one thing that I find so remarkable is that these marble statues, often the sheep were twice the size that they were in real life. And it wasn't because the artists didn't know what they were doing. It was to represent the idea of atonement and the weight of sin that was upon Christ. And in fact, the only New Testament parable in which this is found, where the shepherd picks up the sheep and places it on his back, is found in Luke chapter 15. And Jesus is addressing the Pharisees and the scribes. And I'll pick up in verse 4. He says, "What man among you who has 100 sheep and loses one of them does not leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one until he finds it? And when he has found it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and comes home. He calls his friends, his neighbors together, saying, 'Rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep.' I tell you, it is true that there is more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 who do not need repentance." And when I first see this parable, I see that it has two faces to it. And the first is that of God's grace and his never-ending love. See, in the Old Testament, God is shown as the good shepherd and the strong shepherd. We see it in Psalms 23 as well as Isaiah 40, chapter 11. Jesus goes and he finds the lost sheep. And what Jesus is saying in this parable here is, I am the fulfillment of what the prophets foretold. See, I go, I find, pursue, and I am relentless after those that are lost. And in my personal opinion, this is the best case of foreshadowing we see in the entire Bible in Luke chapter 15. Just as the shepherd climbs the rugged terrains and the hills to find the sheep, so Christ climbed the hill to Golgotha. The shepherd with his sheep and Christ with his cross, both bearing weights that were not their own, but they both took on voluntarily. The Christology that we see in Luke chapter 15 is astounding. It's Jesus, and he's foreshowing his death and what's going to happen. And the second aspect I see in this is our call. We were the sheep, and we were the weight of the sin that put Christ on the cross. But we were ransomed. We were pursued, we were sought, we were found, we were shown this grace, and hopefully we embraced this grace. And if that's true, then it's time that we share in it. And Paul tells us in Ephesians 5:1 that we are to be imitators of Christ as dearly beloved children. And if this is true, then we can see clearly that Jesus was relentless in all aspects after the one that was lost. And these 77.5 million results from Google tell us anything, it's that those around us are so very concerned with the temporal but physical lives of those around us, but it seems like we neglect the eternal but spiritual side of those around us. So, if it's true that we're put on this earth to make God's glory shine brighter and to have Jesus' love shown into all those around us, I believe the only way we can truly do that is to show them the greatest love, the greatest mercy and grace ever seen on this earth, personified in the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And the only way we can do that is to never stop and to continually be relentless after the one.